But Claudia, it's way too early to upload your Jane Austen July TBR. You silly. Hello and welcome to Spinster's Library. I'm Claudia, it is the middle of June and this is my Jane Austen July TBR and channel plans. I couldn't wait to talk about this. I know there's still 2 weeks to go until Jane Austen July actually starts, but I have been thinking about what I want to read ever since Katie and Marissa uploaded their announcement videos. In case you're not familiar with what Jane Austen July is, it's a readathon, a month-long readathon all about Jane Austen, and it is hosted this year for the second time by Katie from Books and Things and by Marissa from Blatantly Bookish. I will link both of their announcement videos in the description box. If you like Jane Austen, if you think you might like Jane Austen, if you're curious about her, then definitely go and take part. I have very cleverly and sneakily, and you should congratulate me for that, arranged my research in such a way that I will actually be reading Jane Austen as part of my PhD research. I'm a music historian and I am researching music in roundabout Jane Austen's time. Well, more specifically, I'm researching the first 3 decades of the 19th century. And as it happens, a lot of music is described in Jane Austen's works. And I'm now at a stage where I want to really dive deeply into her work and try and see what I can figure out about the music of her time in her novels. So, my TBR is a little bit ambitious. However, I will be reading those books in work time, during my workday, during my 9 to 5, which is pretty amazing. Of course, at the end of Jane Austen July, I'm hoping to get some sort of research paper, some sort of essay out of that. And I guess I'll be updating you along the way. You could also say that that means I'm cheating at Jane Austen July because I'm very conveniently using my own research to fit this readathon. But let's get to the actual TBR. There are 7 challenges set by Marissa and Katie, and I'm going to try and hit all of them, but I probably won't be able to. I'm pretty sure I didn't manage it last time. The first and most important challenge, the only one that you have to fulfill in order to have taken part in Jane Austen July, is to read one of Jane Austen's main 6 novels. I have read them all previously, and so I've picked the 2 novels that I think will give me the most for my musicological research. The first one is Emma. That's my copy here, and if you are familiar with Emma, you know there's a lot of music happening in that book, and the way that the music is placed within the story carries a lot of meaning, and it's very interesting to pay attention to that if you're planning to read Emma this Jane Austen July. Just try and pay attention to the music and see what you can figure out about the characters through the way they interact with music. So this is my main read. I'm probably going to start this before July because I will be researching this and I need to get on with it really. So I'm probably starting this one next week already, but it will carry me into July. I'm sure this is quite a big book. I think this is the longest Jane Austen novel, although that might be Mansfield Park, but then maybe Mansfield Park just felt like such a long book to me because I didn't like that one. Emma, though, is my second favourite Jane Austen book after Pride and Prejudice, and I can't wait to reread it. The second book, with a bit of a focus on music, I wonder if you can guess, is Sense and Sensibility. And this one is actually one of the books that Katie and Marissa are going to do as a read-along in the first half of July. So I will be joining that read-along and I'll be reading this in the first 2 weeks of July. Now famously in this book we have 2 sisters, one sensible and one sensitive one, and Marianne, the sensitive one, is the one who plays music, who's a performer in this book. This is one of those books I don't actually enjoy the novel Sense and Sensibility all that much. I mean, it's still fun to read, it's still a great novel, it's still Jane Austen, but it's definitely one of my lesser favourites, and therefore one that I haven't reread as many times as the others. And I think a lot of people's opinion of Sense and Sensibility is maybe slightly tinted maybe slightly rose-tinted by the fantastic 1990s adaptation of it, whereas the novel is actually a lot less tight, a lot less well-rounded, a lot less well thought out than this adaptation. So that will be an interesting one to dive into, and it'll be an interesting one to explore with the other people who are going to be reading this along with Katie and Marissa. The second challenge is to read something by Jane Austen that's not one of her main 6 novels. And I know there are some unfinished works, there's some juvenilia, but the work that I have picked to read for this is Lady Susan, which is, I believe, a short novel or maybe a novella of hers that is finished but wasn't published during her lifetime. And the reason why I've picked this is because Marissa from Blatantly Bookish is a huge fan of this book, and she's kind of made me curious about it, so I will be hopefully be reading that nearer the end of July after Sense and Sensibility. The third challenge is to read a non-fiction work about Jane Austen or her time, and this is again a challenge where I'm blatantly just cheating and picking something that I was going to read for my research anyway. I'll be reading a lot of non-fiction, I guess a lot of academic works about Jane Austen and her time during the month of July. I've been reading works about her time for 2 years straight now, and one of the more Jane Austen specific books that I'll be reading is the Cambridge Companion to Emma, which is edited by Peter Sabor. And this is quite a boring pick, you know, the Cambridge Companion isn't exactly a sexy book, but I have read parts of this book before, I've read chapters of this book before for research, and it's just a fantastic closer look at some of the issues and topics in Emma. There is one fantastic chapter on music, for example, but also loads of other topics that are discussed, like, you know, social issues and economy and things like that within Emma. So I will be getting that from a university library, and I'll be reading that throughout July as well. I also have a whole stack of Jane Austen related papers and journal articles here, and I'll also be reading more about the general time period, obviously about the music of that time. Basically, all of the things I do for my PhD could be considered an answer to the challenge, read a non-fiction book about Jane Austen or her time period. So I'm not sure how much I'm going to be talking about this reading. I don't usually, for example, add these kinds of books to my Goodreads, so books that I read for my PhD. I don't even count, I don't really add them to Goodreads, I don't talk about them in my wrap-ups and stuff. It'd be a little bit weird to start that now, but maybe I will make a separate video about academic literature about Jane Austen. We'll see. Then the next challenge, we're at number 4 now, is to read a retelling of a Jane Austen book, and this is one where I actually don't have an answer. I have read some retellings. I've read Bridget Jones's Diary, and I've read Longbourn, which are 2 of the ones that are usually recommended for this sort of thing. I wasn't a huge fan of either, but if you have a recommendation for a really good Jane Austen retelling, then please comment down below and let me know. Especially one that I can find in my local library, that'd be fantastic. Let's get to challenge 5 then, which is to read a book by a contemporary of Jane Austen. And hello, I'm cheating again, because I'm picking a book by her contemporary Thomas Gisborne. What, you've never heard of Thomas Gisborne? He wrote the chart-topping smash hit An Enquiry into the Duties of the Female Sex. As you can tell from the title, this is a non-fiction book. This is in fact a conduct book. This is a manual for young women on how to behave, on their duties, on, you know, what they should do, what they should wear, what they should aspire to. Sounds like a lot of fun. Well, Jane Austen herself actually really enjoyed this book. She did mention it in a letter, and I am looking at this book as part of my wider research into conduct literature of that time. But you can tell the tradition of men telling women what to do goes back a long way. Challenge number 6 is to watch a direct screen adaptation, and I'm going to be really boring here, and I'm going to rewatch the 1990s BBC 6-part adaptation for the 100th time. It is the most comforting of comfort watches, and I can't wait to either binge this on a weekend or maybe spread it out over the course of a week. It's the perfect adaptation of a book. It's the most complete, the most faithful, the most well done book adaptation I have ever seen, and I will forever love this adaptation. Challenge number 7 is to watch a modern screen adaptation, and this is another one where I don't have an answer yet. I have watched quite a few modern screen adaptations, from the obvious ones like Clueless. I've watched pretty much all of the online ones, the Lizzie Bennet diaries, etc. I've watched things like Lost in Austen. Did anyone else watch that? That's from a few years ago. That was a mini-series which was so bad that it's actually really enjoyable to watch. Yeah, so if you have any recommendations for modern screen adaptation of Jane Austen books, then again, let me know in the comments, because I am on the lookout for one, but I want to watch a new one. I don't want to rewatch one of the ones I've already seen. There you go, that was my TBR. If you can't tell, I'm ridiculously excited about Jane Austen July. I've got a whole lot of videos planned, so during July there will be at least one Jane Austen related video every week on my channel. Most of the ideas that I've got are actually rather silly. They're more for sort of fun, humorous videos. I don't want to share any of them right now, just in case I don't end up making them, but likely is that you'll see a lot of Jane Austen on my channel. I want to plug a few things that I have done. So I did a video called Where to Start with Jane Austen, which I will link in the description box, and well, it's me telling you where I think you should start with Jane Austen if you haven't read any of her books yet. But also, if you are familiar with her books, it's kind of a short overview over her 6 main novels that might remind you of, you know, the 6 main novels, and maybe help you pick one for your Jane Austen July. I have also, and again this is slightly premature, I've also made a playlist of music on Spotify for Jane Austen July, and I have picked some works from her time and before, because obviously people didn't just, you know, people in 1814 didn't just listen to music from 1814, but they listened to music from some decades back that was still popular. So this is, I think it's 4 hours long, a playlist of mainly chamber music, but also some solo music and some orchestral music that Jane Austen and her heroines may have heard or played. And I'll link that Spotify playlist in the description box as well. I'd love to hear your feedback on it. Maybe some of the things on there will surprise you if you're not too familiar with early 19th century music. And I will make a separate video about that playlist and about music in Jane Austen's time more generally. However, if you have any questions that you want answered about music in Jane Austen's time, then pop them in the description box and I'll answer them as well. Other than that, I am looking forward to reading all of these books and legitimately reading them during the day. Thank you so much to Katie and Marissa for organising this again. This was one of my favourite reading events that I took part in last year, and it looks like this year is going to be bigger and better and more Austen-y than ever before. There is also a Goodreads group for this readathon, so I'll link that in the description box. Everything will be linked in the description box, and let me know what you're planning to read, if you're planning to take part, and give me all of your book recommendations in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and please excuse the slightly giddy and overexcited me. I know you don't usually see me like that, but I genuinely cannot wait for Jane Austen July to start. Bye.